Joining us on the line tonight is pro wrestling star, former TNA superstar, and I guess you could call him a world traveler, and that's Cody Diener. Cody, thanks for joining the two-man power trip of wrestling.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
So, Cody, what have you been up to since we last saw you on TNA Wrestling a few years back? How's your career progressing as you travel back, I guess, throughout Canada now, right?
Yeah, man, that's going to take me a long time to answer that if you want me to fill you in on what I've been doing, because that's like 5 years of my career. But I've been doing lots of things. I've been really enjoying doing the independent scene. The independent scene is thriving right now, especially in the last few years. So I'm super busy with that, selling merch like crazy. I've also been doing some fun shows for a local guy, carnival circuit. I've been doing some carnival wrestling, going back to the old original Carney days when pro wrestling started. I've been doing some of those in the summertime. That's how I spend my summers. And I've been also doing a lot of other things, too, still in the entertainment realm. I have a band. I'm a drummer in a band. I actually filmed a pilot for a television show recently, and I actually did some theater right after I got released from TNA, some Shakespearean theater, believe it or not.
Right.
So, man, I've been doing a whole bunch of crazy things, and, I keep myself super busy.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because, you were definitely, a pretty, I guess I would say a pretty featured character in TNA for a little while there. And then, after the Hogan Bischoff regime came in, you're kind of, I guess, abruptly let go. And we will be getting into that. But why don't we take a step back towards the beginning of your career? And why don't you tell us how you got into the business? Were you a fan growing up?
Oh, yeah, man. I was a huge fan ever since the age of 5. I was a huge wrestling fan. My first memories were of when I was 5 years old, my mom, sitting me down after my brother was going to kindergarten and saying, okay, what do you want to do today? And my answer every single day was the same, and that answer was, I want to watch Hulk Hogan. So she'd put, I had a VHS tape of Hogan and Bundy in the steel cage, and I watched that every day on repeat over and over and over again. And then I had this blue bear, this stuffed bear that I beat the living crap out of every day. And that was my earliest memories. My earliest childhood memories are watching wrestling and loving wrestling. It's something I've always wanted to do. So when I turned 18, I started seeking out wrestling schools, found one fairly local to me, and started training when I was 18, my last year of high school, and I've been doing it ever since.
So then about what year was that?
2000.
So that was, pretty much in the higher end of the Attitude Era boom, and we was just getting into the epic year 2001 where we saw 2 major companies close and the WWF kind of start to, turn their business into a completely different product with no competition. But who were your influences getting into the actual business?
There's a lot. Actually, going back to what you just said in terms of the time frame, coming in, I talked about this with guys that I trained with. A lot of us felt like we were 5 years too late, because I trained, and when I was done training, there was, like you had said, ECW and WCW were non-existent, whereas 5 years earlier, guys were getting picked up left and right. So I really feel like I was, just missed the boat on that. But influences, at a very young age, I liked who I was supposed to like. I liked all the baby faces. I liked Hulk Hogan. I liked Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I liked Jimmy Snuka. But after I got into the business and was rewatching the wrestling I loved from my childhood, I started to really appreciate the guys that were able to elicit emotions from me as a kid, those emotions of hatred. So I started to rewatch and realized I actually love Roddy Piper, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Jake the Snake Roberts, just to name a few of amazing workers who I despised as I was a kid, but I was supposed to. So as I started to study the business and became a student of the game, so to speak, I started to expand my horizons and start to really watch closely a lot of those guys from my youth.
It's funny, you were saying that the Hogan and the King Kong Bundy tape and the beating up the bear. I had the Hogan Andre tape, and I was beating up a bear and a monkey. They were like doing it together. It's very similar.
Oh,
yeah. Around the same age.
yeah, man.
Funny,
like I beat the crap out of that thing. All the stuffing was in the head and the feet of this thing. It had no middle left. It was just totally beat the crap out of it. And I also I went through shopping bags like crazy, like the plastic shopping bags you get at the grocery store. I would punch a hole in the top of it and one on each side and wear it as a shirt so I could rip it off like Hogan. And I'd make my entrance in the living room and then just beat the crap out of that thing, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those were the days, the Hogan days.
Yeah, man.
Being a fan, yep.
Mm-hmm.
But getting into your actual training, who trained you and who was in your class with you? Who else was in there?
In my class, there's no one super significant that have like necessarily gone to be on TV. But in my in my actual class, I was trained by Danger Boy Derek Wilde, and a lot of really good local talents were there. But around the same time that I started to train, my first year of training, I trained with Danger Boy Derek Wilde, and then I moved to another town and started to do some additional training with Showtime Eric Young. And he became a very close friend of mine, still is to this day, still one of my best friends. And he had some awesome talent in his class. That some of your people listening might know. Ty Dillinger from NXT was a guy that I trained with. Crazy Steve, who's now in TNA, is another guy that I trained with as well. So there's a few guys that are road buddies of mine that have gone on to do some awesome things.
Were you surprised that Eric Young was able to become a main eventer, or did you see that in him all along?
I've seen that in him all along. Anybody who was doing indies with him, like me, when back in the early 2000s, he was main eventing everywhere on the indie scene, was wrestling a main event style, was cutting a main event promo, and was always the most over guy in the show. And it was just obvious to everybody that saw him that he had it. He had that it factor that you can't, teach. He's always had that. And I always saw that. He was a guy that I looked up to when I was getting in. We were both young getting in, but I always, admired his athleticism and admired his talents, even 15 years ago.
Now, as you start to progress a little bit in your career, where did you end up? Like, what was the first league? Was that the Hardcore Wrestling Federation, or was that a different league where you kind of made your home after you started out in the business?
Yeah, that was actually, the Hardcore Wrestling Federation was a quite large indie in my area when I was just getting in, and they were kind of just closing down as I was getting in. So my first show was actually for the Hardcore Wrestling Federation, but then they closed down shortly after. So the majority of my first few years was with the promotion that my wrestling school started to run, which is Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling, which then became Neo Spirit Pro Wrestling. And they're probably most famous for actually a ladder match between the guy who trained me, Danger Boy Derek Wilde, and Showtime Eric Young. I think there's a YouTube video clip out of it out there somewhere. If you go to YouTube and look Showtime Eric Young and Danger Boy Derek Wilde. But we had like 1,000 people in a little Legion Hall to see their ladder match, and the card was just indie guys. We never, ever brought in a name or TV talent. It was all local indie guys. And we were averaging 500-600 people a show. If we had 400 people at a show, it was considered a failure. It was amazing. It was amazing promotion. And that was when wrestling was hot. You just had to put up a poster and say wrestling, in the early 2000s, and people were coming.
Plus, I feel like Canadian fans, I feel like there's such a loyal fan base. When they like something, they really get into it. Do you notice that with the Canadian fans? Do you really feel like a sense of loyalty from them?
Absolutely. It's very true. Being as a fan going to events. I think Jerry Lawler would say it sometimes when they would go to Canada, and he'd say, "This is like Bizarro World," where we'd be, cheering for the bad guy or whatever. But we were cheering out of loyalty to the people that we grew up with, and didn't matter whether they were a heel or babyface. We were just loyal to the people that we really liked and who we grew up with, and we were going to cheer for whoever we damn well pleased. And Canadians are like that. It's awesome. And I get a huge sense of loyalty from my fan base doing independent shows around here. I had a loyal fan come up to me just a few weeks ago at a show, and he aged me. He came up and said, "I remember coming to Niagara Falls to see you wrestle for Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling." And I said, "Oh man, that's awesome. Did you used to come with all your buddies and jump in a car and come?" And he looks at me and goes, "No, I was 8 years old." I was like, "Holy crap!" So looking at this guy, I realized, holy crap, I've been doing this for a while. I got people that have been following my career for the last 15 years. It makes me feel old, but it's kind of cool. And I meet loyal Canadian fans like that all the time.
That's awesome. That's great. It shows you we're getting older. As Hogan said, every day the boys in the back are a day older. Or whatever that famous quote was. Yeah, it's true. Speaking of things that are cool, though, you did get a few tryouts with WWE, but you weren't Cody Deaner yet. You were Cody Steele. Now, the Cody Steele character in WWE, was that just basically a few matches? I remember you had a match against Muhammad Hassan, but was that just a few matches you had with WWE?
Yeah, I did just a few with them. I did the Muhammad Hassan. I did a show on SmackDown with Kurt Angle as Cody Steele. And then I did also a number of other tryout matches that weren't televised, just in the ring with local guys before the event. I did a whole bunch of extra work. Did that whole thing for, probably about 3 or 4 years. I can't even tell you a number how many I did. I did a whole whack of them. I did a bunch. Anytime they were close to me, I would do them. Yeah.
What was it like with Kurt Angle? Because that was when he was doing that gold medal open challenge. I guess he called you out, or you had a crowd, or whatever. What was that like working with him?
Yeah, actually, the experience was really surreal. Some behind the scenes stuff on that was. It was in Rochester, so he wasn't pulling people out of the crowd. He was inviting any hometown hero athlete from the city to come in and challenge him. Right? So I answered it as the hometown guy. So all I did was that, he asked me my name, I give my name, and then I say, where are you from? And I, say, Rochester, New York, and have this, big babyface smile. And immediately, all I hear, starting to rumble in the audience was, liar, liar, and it gets louder and louder and louder, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, because I wrestled the indies in Rochester, every month, so all the hardcore fans in the audience knew me, so they cheered for me when I came out, But they knew, he's not from Rochester, he's a Canadian boy. So I'm sitting there pretending to be the hometown Rochester guy. There's a liar chant going on. I'm like, oh God, they're not even going to be able to air this, or what are they going to do? I guess they can cut that out or something. But they didn't. They played the whole thing. He roughed me up a bit. The crowd started chanting my name. They were chanting for Cody, 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 and Angle selling it. And man, it was awesome. It was like, I couldn't have asked for it to have gone any better, other than the fact that Kurt Angle kicked me right in the face, for real. Mistimed his kick and misplaced his kick and kicked me right in the jaw and right in the mouth, and I couldn't eat for a week after. But it was worth it.
Hey, you would definitely you would cross paths with Kurt Angle a little bit down the road. But we will stay with the WWE just very briefly. Now, did you get any feedback at all from any of those tryouts or any of the extra work that you did? Did anybody kind of sit you down and give you the lay of the land and maybe see if the door was open?
Yeah, not so much after those tryouts. Like I got a number of a lot of positive feedback when I did it. The match that I had with Muhammad Hassan and then the Kurt Angle actually were a Monday and a Tuesday. They happened right side by side. I did the Muhammad Hassan dark match, and it went so well that Steve Kern, one of the producers, suggested that they use me on SmackDown the next day. So he introduced me personally to Kurt Angle and put me over to Kurt right in front of him, told him how great I was and how good of a match I had. So I got a lot of really positive feedback. And so that's what they kept asking me to come back, and I went back a number of times. But then nothing was happening. I wasn't getting a contract. And so finally, one of the times I was there doing extra work, I walked right up to Arn Anderson, who was a guy I respected, and I wanted to know his opinion. And I walked right up to him. I said, how the hell do I get a job here? And I think he was kind of taken aback. I said, I just need somebody to tell me straight up what I need to do, because whatever I'm doing right now isn't working. And I've been here a number of times, and I need to know why I'm not getting signed, if you can tell me, or what I need to do. And he just looked me in the face, and he just gave me really simple advice, and he just said, you got to be different. I said, okay. And then he clarified, he said, we got a Rey Mysterio. We don't need another Rey Mysterio, but he's different because of the way he moves. We got a Big Show. He's giant. He's different. Those guys have jobs because they're different. But you can't be Rey Mysterio and you can't be a giant. But you got to do something that's going to make you stand out. So that got my wheels spinning, and I realized, I'm a good worker. I knew the game. I knew psychology. I knew the basics. I knew how to do everything. But the only way I figured I could really stand out from the pack was to change my look. And that's when I created the Cody Deaner character and decided to cut my hair willingly into a mullet and walk around like that for 5 years of my life, grow a handlebar mustache, and totally altered the way I look. And that got me noticed. Specifically, it got me noticed by Krista Joseph, who was a writer on SmackDown and is now writing for Lucha Underground. He became a huge fan of Cody Deaner. Tommy Dreamer was a huge fan of that recreation. And the only reason I know Krista Joseph was a big fan is because Tommy Dreamer told me, he said, Krista Joseph has your 8x10 promo picture up on his desk wall, like right beside his writing desk. So I was like, holy crap, okay. So I was pretty excited. And so I got offered to come back for a couple more tryouts, and I also did a pre-tape, which is when they were really interested in a guy. They'd bring him into the promo room and have him cut promos. So I went and did some pre-tapes to introduce the Cody Deaner character. Those went across Krista Joseph's desks, went across a couple other people's desks. And it was right around the time that I was doing that I was also sniffing around at TNA and getting interest from TNA. And I don't know if I would have been offered anything from the WWE, but I never was. I ended up getting offered something from TNA first, and it was my first big break, so I went with that.
So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the TNA run, how did you get some of the inspiration for a lot of the intricacies of the Cody Deaner character?
Honestly, it was from people that I grew up with. I grew up in a very small town, tiny. It's not even a town. There's no street light in where I grew up. There's actually only 2 stop signs in the small little village that I lived in that had a population of about 50 to 100 people year-round. But in the summertime, the population was about 1,000 people. That's because in the summertime, it was the 3 trailer parks in town were full. So I grew up around trailer park rednecks, and a lot of the inspiration for my character simply came from the guys that I grew up around growing up.
So then you get the interest of TNA. Who was the first person to reach out to you and say, come down to Orlando, we want to give you a shot?
I reached out myself. I was good friends with Showtime Eric Young, and I would go down to visit him back in the Nashville days. Actually, the first time I actually wrestled for TNA, I actually did it before the Cody Deaner character. I wrestled for TNA. I wrestled Abyss on, I think it was Explosion, or whatever it was before they actually had Impact. I wrestled Abyss back in the Nashville days, and I would go every summer to Nashville and then later to Orlando just to hang out with Showtime, but be backstage and kind of just talk to the guys and let my face be shown. And the first person to take an interest just in my look and just me as a person was Jeff Jarrett. And we talked. We actually kind of started pitching and just having informal talks about what they could do with the Cody Deaner character. Man, 2, maybe even 3 years before I actually got signed. Because I was doing the Cody Deaner character for a number of years before I ended up getting my contract. And it was about, 2 summers of me just kind of, talking with them informally before it actually happened. So
that's pretty interesting that Jarrett was that into the character that much before. But when you got there, who wrote for you specifically? Most of that time, was Russo involved, or was he more towards the top? Because it seems like the Cody Deaner character definitely could have some elements of Vince Russo, kind of filtered in there.
Yeah. Well, actually, what happened was when I got hired and kind of was coming in, it was actually right when Jeff Jarrett was leaving and losing power. So I was originally, from my understanding, I was going to be brought in more as the Cody Deaner character that I was doing on the independent circuit. I was still a character, like an obvious redneck hillbilly, but I was a wrestler. I wasn't kind of a bumbling buffoon, idiot. I was a redneck, but I was a tough redneck, and I was going to come in as a wrestler. But some things got changed, and I was no longer going to be brought in that way. I was going to be brought in as, ODB's love interest, as a crazy, wild hillbilly fan who was in love with ODB and had never wrestled a day in his life. So that drastically altered what I was able to do work-wise in the ring. And yes, Vince Russo was the guy I the whole time I was there was the guy who was writing for me and who I was involved with in terms of pitching ideas and getting things done. It was all Russo.
One question I really wanted to ask, I was very curious. Did you? I almost kind of feel like maybe I know the answer, but did you like the pairing with ODB, or did you really did you like that they put you in with her, basically, like that was going to be your gimmick with her?
Yeah, I liked the pairing, but in hindsight, I didn't like how that pairing was done. Well, because I have, and I get this a lot from fans that I talk to now. It's like, oh man, like they totally misused you when you were there. And these are coming from fans that have grown up and seen me, wrestle for the last 15 years, and know that I can have an awesome match, I can have a kick-ass main event match, but I wasn't able to show that while I was there. So I think the fit with me and ODB couldn't have been more perfect. But I think if I could have been more of a tougher, badass redneck boyfriend, very like essentially the male version of her, I think we could have drawn money for sure. There would have been more money involved rather than just having me be kind of the bumbling redneck fool boyfriend that, hey, I had fun with and I made it work. But I think it could have been more, and I think she thought the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was an entertaining duo, but I felt like they kind of chopped their legs out by kind of saying, "Oh, this guy, he has no wrestling experience. He's just a fan of ODB." Like the way they brought you in, I feel like maybe that wasn't the best way to showcase your wrestling ability.
No, absolutely, it wasn't. No, it was extremely hard in terms of getting my legs cut out from under me. There was a number of times, like, for example, when I had my first match, I was reminded by the producers, like, you got to remember, you can't wrestle. You're not a wrestler. So I'm going out there in a wrestling match, fighting guys, but I got to do it in a way without it kind of exposing the business, even though it isn't already. The fact that I'm going to even be able to survive a match with these guys that are trained wrestlers, but I have to do it in a way that shows that I'm not a total pro, because then it makes it look like anybody can get in there and do it, right? So I've been told I got to do it as if I'm not a wrestler. So trying to wrestle but not wrestle at the same time is pretty damn difficult, but I feel like I was able to do it. And then when they started to pair me with the Knockouts and I was wrestling girls, the backstory on that was they had this whole idea planned out that I was going to wrestle girls leading up to my big blow-off match with ODB. But something happened along the way. I don't remember the exact story, but there was a story that was in the news that it actually involved MTV or Viacom or whatever, one of the major corporate companies that was close to Spike TV, where a guy physically assaulted a woman. I don't remember the full story. I was told by a producer. I think it was actually Vince Russo who told me this. But he's telling me that this happened, and they had been told by Spike TV that guys are not allowed to touch the girls physically in any way. They're not allowed to touch them. And they had just written 5 weeks of TV of me, leading up to matches, me against ODB, where I was going to be wrestling girls on the show. So I said, well, now what the hell are we going to do? And he goes, we're going on as planned. We can't rewrite the show. I said, well, how the hell am I going to wrestle? How the hell am I going to wrestle these girls if I can't touch them? He goes, that's what you got to figure out. He goes, I believe you can do it. Holy crap! So, with that being said, I got a lot of slack from certain people about how those matches weren't the greatest matches, or that I was taking a spot away from a girl and yada yada yada. Well, if you actually go back and watch them, knowing that backstory, realizing I had to try to put a match together where I was wrestling a girl, but I'm not allowed to touch the girl. Go back and watch it in that light, and maybe you'll view those matches a little bit different, and maybe have a new appreciation for what I did.
That's great. And that's so. I don't even know how else to say it, but that's so Russo of it to be like, you got to wrestle a girl, but wait, I can't touch them. No, you can't touch them. Figure it out.
Yeah. I think, Russo gets a lot of slack from, he's a very polarizing guy. People either like him or they hate him. I didn't necessarily like what I was doing, but I really liked Vince Russo. I still like Vince Russo. He was great. He worked with me closely. He was always open to my ideas. there's a couple times that I would actually send things to him, suggestions on a promo that I wanted to do. So one time in particular, I sent him something, and I was sent, the script, or the, if you want to call it that, for the show, and everything that I had sent him was in there, like word for word. Everything that I wanted to do, he had used it. And anytime he handed me verbiage and said, he'd written something for me, okay, here's your promo. Every time he gave it to me, he said, this is your promo, but this is not what you have to say. This is the gist of what you have to say. But you're Cody Deaner. You know your character. You say it how you would say it. Just get across this idea. But I trust you, and that you do it how you want to do it. So I mean, that was great, having that freedom. So even though Russo was writing for me, I was able to make the promos and make the things entertaining within the guidelines that I was given.
Yeah, Russo, I mean, he's definitely polarizing. You hear a lot of stories from him. But a lot of the guys that actually work with him one-on-one say that, he's pretty good with, like, bouncing ideas back and forth and stuff. So that's pretty much in line with what you hear about him. As crazy as some of his ideas are, so you hear, but he will work with the guys. That's a cool story with Vince.
Yeah, but he's a great guy. I really do like Vince. I got along with him great, and all my working with him creatively was totally positive.
Now, a little bit after that, or basically around the same time, you become the Knockouts champion. Was that weird being like the woman's champ? Almost like I guess somewhat of a joke that you the guy is the woman's champ. Was that strange?
Yeah, I mean, they approached me with the idea. Vince came to me and asked me, or told me that that's what they wanted to do, and if that was something that I'd be willing to do. And being, a year into the company and being the new guy, and they're coming to you saying, here's what we want to do, will you do it? I wasn't really in the position to say no. I had, the only concern I had with it, I knew I could make it work. I knew it was meant to be funny, but I could make it work. And my vision for it was, okay, if they let me do this properly, I can be the new Andy Kaufman of professional wrestling. I can get heat off of this, and we can actually make money off of this. If they allow me to be a big enough jerk about this, then I can create a me versus the entire Knockouts division, where I'm the guy that comes in and says, I'm better than all of you girls. None of you are worth it, or worth a darn. Only a man should be holding a wrestling championship. And we could have really made it work really well. They let me do a little bit of that, but they tweaked it. But my main concern was, well, what do I do after? Because I know that if I go and I wrestle a girl, at the end of this, I know what the finish is. The finish is ODB is going to beat me. So as a guy being beat by a girl, I've just lost a ton of credibility as a professional wrestler. So if a girl's going to beat me, I need to know what are the plans for me after that. Is this the last angle that I'm going to be doing with the company, and then you're going to let me go, or something planned? And Vince told me, no, what we're actually going to do is the plan was after the match, I was going to be angry and I was going to attack ODB. And then Trevor Murdoch, who was had a short-term contract with TNA at the time, who was wrestling as Jethro Holiday is what his name was in TNA. But Trevor Murdoch was going to come out and start fighting me and scrapping me for, attacking her after the bell. And then we were going to fight and have a crazy brawl all over the arena post-match. And then what we were going to do for a number of weeks after that was continue to fight each other in and out of backstage promos, during matches. You would just see me and Trevor Murdoch beating the crap out of each other anywhere and everywhere throughout the show for a number of weeks. kind of like just these two wild, crazy rednecks. And then it was going to eventually, with multiple twists and things, eventually lead to Trevor Murdoch respecting me because I'm, a smaller than him, but I guess a smaller than average wrestler who can take a total ass whipping, and he beat the crap out of me week in and week out, but finally ended up respecting me and kind of liking this feisty little redneck guy and kind of taking me under his wing. And then we become the redneck tag team on the show. And I said, awesome, sounds perfect. You got a plan for me already after. Let's do it. And about 3 weeks before the pay-per-view against ODB, Trevor Murdoch got fired. So that X-made that. So I immediately went into pitch mode and started pitching all these ideas for things for me to do after I lost to ODB, and there was some interest on some of them, but they kind of all fell on deaf ears, and none of them got used or done.
So overall, did you enjoy your time there, or was it a little bittersweet because they kind of could have had something better with you, and they kind of, they blew it, but basically they kind of blew it.
It's bittersweet. I had a great time. Like I always have fun in the ring. Like no matter what I'm doing, whether it's something totally ridiculous or silly or totally serious, and 60-minute Iron Man match, like I've done those before. Like whatever range that it is, I'm always having fun. And I had a blast there. I made a bunch of friends. So that was the sweet part. The bitter part is not bitter. I'm not bitter about anything. But to go with the phrase bittersweet, I guess the negative part is, looking back on it, I know I had more to offer than they allowed me to do. I had more to offer them as a company and could have made the money, but given the scenarios I was in, I made the best of what I was given, and thought I did a good job, and was told by a number of people and some higher up guys that I did do a great job, and I was really good at what I did. So that felt good.
And it was kind of, I guess, singled out once the Hogan-Bischoff regime, which I mentioned a little earlier, stepped in because, a guy who you had mentioned, that you watched growing up, Hulk Hogan, had said that the Cody Deaner character was, quote, low budget, and in their, quote, revamping of TNA, you kind of were unceremoniously, let go, and they really went nowhere with the direction that they were, I guess, heading the company in with some of their ideas. But I guess you can almost even say, ironically, your pal, Showtime Eric Young, kind of inherited almost your exact storyline and role with ODB, but about a year and a half after you were out of the company. What are your memories and thoughts on that whole dismissal and then all the other stuff afterwards?
Yeah, in terms of the dismissal, I heard the same thing you just said, but I was never told that by anybody in the TNA office. I was given other reasons. I wasn't told, to my face that Hulk Hogan was deciding that he didn't like Cody Deaner and he was low budget. I would have liked to have had Hulk Hogan come up and tell me that. It'd be a sweet. At least I could say, the guy that I watched growing up, beating up my teddy bear as a kid, actually knew who I was. And even though he fired my ass, at least I'd have a Hogan story. But I didn't get that. So I don't know if that's true, if he did think that. If so, that sucks if that's the truth. Because, there was a reason I looked, quote-unquote, low budget. I was looking low budget on purpose. You know,
yeah,
I was a redneck
exactly.
who I was a redneck who also wasn't a wrestler, so I couldn't have wrestling gear. I had to look like a guy who's trying to look like a wrestler who's a fan. So there was a method to my madness. I was looking like that on purpose and just following orders. So there's that whole deal. But yeah, and I, you know, getting fired from your dream job after getting your first break sucks. It was a month after I got married. I was married to my wife, starting a new life. Gonna be, you know, had my dream woman, my dream life, my dream job, and then a month after our glorious wedding, I got fired. So that kind of sucked. But I just, you know, brushed myself up, picked myself up, and kept on trucking. But in terms of the other thing, like the Showtime doing the stuff with ODB, I thought it was great. They're both my friends, close friends of mine, so I thought what they were doing was fantastic. And of course, the worker in me immediately started creatively thinking of ways that I could get involved and they could bring me back in and do something with it. But that never panned out either. But I thought the stuff that Showtime did with ODB was awesome. They're both extremely talented people.
It's funny, the Cody Deaner character, you know, it's pretty funny. And watching Border City Wrestling, and I was watching the Kevin Nash stuff. Like, do you enjoy, like, you know, that aspect of it, like the comedy aspect? Like, you're undefeated with Kevin Nash. Do you enjoy that aspect of it?
Absolutely, man. Like, that particular promo was extremely fun to do because it was just, you know, we just did it. And I cracked Kevin, and I also cracked the guy interviewing, and I cracked the guy on the camera, and I cracked everybody. Like, everybody that was in the room started to laugh when I, you know, and but we kept going with it, and we ended up using that take. They weren't sure. Scott D'Amore was actually producing that segment, and wasn't sure if they were going to be able to use it because we cracked everybody, but it ended up being the best take for that promo. But yeah, I mean, I like to have fun. So me doing humorous things in promos and adding some humor into things for my character, it just comes natural to me. It's just a natural extension of who I actually am as a guy. So absolutely, I enjoy it. It's just the kind of person that I am.
And you just said Scott D'Amore, and before you were talking about Jeff Jarrett being a fan. Any possibility of going to GFW with Global Force coming around? Has there been any talks with them?
All I will say to that is stay tuned.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice little tease. Okay. Interesting.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Now, as we start to wind down a little bit here, you've wrestled a lot of big names and a lot of cool names that I'm sure hopefully good wrestling fans would know of great wrestlers like Michael Elgin, of course, Bobby Roode. Hopefully they know Joe Doring, who's a great wrestler, and of course Brody Lee, a.k.a. Luke Harper, Tyson Dukes, who's a buddy of the show's. I mean, what would you say would be your favorite match of all time, or maybe even matches that you've had?
Yeah, I can't narrow down to one. That's too tough. There's been a number of matches that I'm very proud of that I've had with Sean Spears, who now is wrestling as the Perfect 10, Ty Dillinger on NXT, who is a guy that is not being showcased enough. That guy could make the WWE $1 million today if they let him. He's an amazing talent, and I've had a number of good matches with him. One in particular was a last man standing match that we had, where we weren't originally supposed to be the main event of the show, but things got changed around and they put us in the main event, and we rocked the house. It was awesome. I've also had some matches that I'm really proud of with the local talent named Fighting Irish Jake O'Reilly. He did a couple of shows with All Japan Pro Wrestling a few years ago. that's the most notable things that he has done. He's also done he did a few matches with TNA back in the Asylum days as well. But we did an angle where we started the house for this indie promotion was about 150 people, and the promoter said, "I'll let you book your own feud with Jake O'Reilly for the next year." And by the end of the year, we drew 1,000 people to the final show for the blow-off of our feud. So we went from 150 to 1,000 people to our blow-off match. So those series of matches that I had with him, I'm extremely proud of.
Well, very good. Now, who would you say of all your opponents would be maybe your favorite opponent, maybe a guy that you just click with and you really enjoy working? I know you just named a couple good guys like Dillinger, but any guy that sticks out as a favorite opponent of yours?
I can't say there's one guy that sticks out, no. There's just, wrestlers who might be listening to this will know what I mean. Like, you just get in there and you just click with certain guys. I know the handful of guys that I've wrestled that I just totally click with. You mentioned a few of them. I always clicked with Michael Elgin when I wrestled him. I always had really good chemistry with Brody Lee, Luke Harper. My trainer, Danger Boy Derek Wilde, I've wrestled him so many times. I don't even know how many times I've wrestled him. But we always clicked with one another. Sean Spears, for sure, I click with. A new, younger talent who's just recently had a lot of tryouts with the WWE and, sent in his Tough Enough video. So people should go check that out. His name is Tyler Turva. I click with him. I've had some really good matches with him in the last year. We click really well. So those are just a few of the guys that I love getting in the ring with.
Now, we named a lot of the great wrestlers that you've wrestled, one of good matches that you've had. Is there any guy you haven't wrestled that you would dying to wrestle, like a quote-unquote dream match?
Someone who's working right now or any time in history?
No, it could be any time. It could be all time.
Yeah. Most guys say, from my generation, will say Shawn Michaels, and I have to say the same. If I could get in the ring with Shawn Michaels and in a perfect world with perfect booking and perfect circumstances, if I could have a feud or series of matches with Shawn Michaels, man, nothing could beat that. He's the greatest wrestler who's ever lived, hands down. The greatest in-ring performer I think there is.
Very cool. Well, how about this is a great one. We call this the Diamond Dallas Page celebratory. Where do you see yourself in 5 years in the wrestling business question?
I definitely see myself wrestling on television again. I'll be on the television screen. I'll be continuing to wrestle who I want to wrestle for, where I want to wrestle for, being my own boss, but I'll be on television, and I will be selling Cody Deaner merchandise hand over fist. And if I got to do it out of the back of my pickup truck, I will.
And with that being said, please tell all the fine folks where they can find all of their selling like hotcakes Cody Deaner merchandise.
Easiest way is simply go to CodyDeaner.com. CodyDeaner.com, I have my online store that I run it. Everything's through me. So if you buy a Cody Deaner t-shirt, I'm putting in the mail and I'm sending it to you. I'm signing it. I'm handling it. It's all done through me. So my online store is at CodyDeaner.com, and also there you have access to t-shirts, CDs of my band, DVDs with bonus footage of my web series that I've produced, pictures, bandanas, hats, all on CodyDeaner.com. And then you can also find links there to my social media accounts. I'm on Twitter at Cody Deaner, and I'm also on Instagram at Cody Deaner. and also links to my YouTube channel, Official Cody Deaner on YouTube.
Awesome, and I definitely recommend checking out the Simpsons T-shirt. That one definitely stood out to me as my favorite as I was breezing through the CodyDeaner.com online store. So thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Yeah, dude, those are brand new. Those just showed up at my house like 2 days ago. So those are hot off the press. I haven't even brought those to a show yet. So I don't. The way I operate is I buy a whole whack of them, and then once I sell out of them, I get a new design. So once those Simpsons shirts are gone, they're gone, and I have a feeling that they're going to go quick. So if people want those, then I got to check them out quick. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure, and like I said earlier, stay tuned, and if my 5-year plan works out and you guys want to have me back on in the future, I'd love to come back.
Awesome. Hopefully before then, but we appreciate that, and we will be talking to you, Cody. Thanks so much, man.
All right, man. Giver.